The wind howled through the narrow streets of Eastborough, a small industrial town where the skyline was a jagged mix of factory smokestacks and faded brick buildings. Elias Grayson pulled his worn trench coat tighter around his broad shoulders, the collar turned up to shield his face from the biting March chill. His graying hair was tucked beneath a threadbare knit cap, and a pair of scratched aviator sunglasses obscured his piercing blue eyes. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another weathered soul trudging through life's unrelenting grind. But Elias was no ordinary drifter. He was the founder and CEO of Hearth and Haven, a modest but growing chain of 10 family-style diners scattered across the region. Today, he was stepping into one of them, Haven's Rest, the smallest and oldest location, not as its visionary leader, but as a stranger seeking a meal. It had been months since Elias last visited a Hearth and Haven diner in person. The company had been his life's work, born from a dream to create places where people could find warmth, good food, and a sense of belonging, no matter who they were. Lately, though, that dream felt distant. Reports from his executive team painted a troubling picture: declining customer satisfaction, rising staff turnover, and a dip in profits at several locations, including Haven's Rest. The regional manager, Victor Langston, had brushed it off as growing pains and market shifts, but Elias wasn't convinced. He'd spent too many years building this company to let it crumble under vague excuses. So, he'd decided to see for himself, slipping into the role of an anonymous patron to uncover the truth. The bell above the door jingled faintly as Elias stepped inside Haven's Rest. The aroma of roasted coffee and buttery biscuits wafted through the air, mingling with the faint tang of grease from the grill. The diner's interior was a time capsule: checkered linoleum floors, red vinyl booths, and walls adorned with faded photographs of Eastborough's heyday. It should have felt like home, but something was off. The handful of customers scattered across the booths ate in near silence, their faces etched with weariness rather than contentment. Behind the counter, 3 employees moved with a sluggish rhythm that bordered on apathy. A young man with a mop of curly hair lazily wiped down the grill, while a woman with a tight ponytail scrolled through her phone near the register. At the far end, a middle-aged man in a stained apron, presumably the shift lead, barked orders without looking up from a clipboard. Elias adjusted his sunglasses and shuffled toward the counter, his boots scuffing against the floor. He slid onto a stool, his gaze drifting over the scene. The woman at the register, whose name tag read Tara, finally glanced up from her phone, her expression a mix of boredom and irritation. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone flat. "Just a coffee to start," Elias replied, keeping his voice low and rough, as if he'd spent years shouting over factory noise. Tara nodded curtly and turned to pour a cup from a pot that looked like it had been sitting for hours. As she slid the chipped mug toward him, Elias noticed movement near the entrance. A figure hesitated just inside the doorway, a woman, slight and hunched, her clothes a patchwork of mismatched layers. Her hair was a tangle of gray beneath a frayed scarf, and she clutched a plastic grocery bag that sagged with the weight of whatever meager possessions she carried. Her eyes darted around the diner, wide and uncertain, as if she expected to be chased out at any moment. Elias watched her take a tentative step forward, then freeze as the shift lead, his name tag identifying him as Ron, strode toward her. "You can't come in here like that," Ron said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. He planted himself between the woman and the dining area, arms crossed over his barrel chest. "We've got a policy. No loitering, no soliciting. Move along." The woman shrank back, her hands trembling as she gripped her bag. I wasn't gonna stay long," she stammered, her voice barely audible. I've been walking all day. I thought maybe I could get some water." "Please." Ron's face hardened. "We're not a soup kitchen. Buy something or get out." His words landed like a slap, and the woman's shoulders slumped further. A few customers glanced up, their expressions a mix of discomfort and indifference, before returning to their meals. Tara smirked from behind the counter, muttering something under her breath to the grill cook, who chuckled darkly. Elias felt a knot tighten in his chest. This wasn't the hearth and haven he'd built. He'd envisioned these diners as sanctuaries, places where anyone could find a moment of respite, not just those with money to spend. He slid off his stool and stepped toward the confrontation, his movements slow but deliberate. "Hold on a minute," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a quiet blade. Ron turned, his brow furrowing as he sized up the scruffy man in the trench coat. "She's not hurting anyone. It's just water." Ron's lip curled. "This doesn't concern you, pal. Sit down and mind your business." "I'll cover it," Elias said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a crumpled $5 bill. He slapped it onto the counter, his eyes locked on Ron's. "Water's free, right? So make it a coffee instead. And throw in a biscuit while you're at it." The woman blinked up at him, her expression a mix of confusion and gratitude. Ron hesitated, clearly annoyed, but the weight of Elias's steady gaze seemed to tip the scales. "Fine," he muttered, jerking his head toward Tara. "Get her a coffee and a biscuit. But she eats and leaves. No lingering." Tara rolled her eyes but complied, pouring a fresh cup and sliding a warm biscuit onto a plate. Elias gestured for the woman to take a seat at the counter, a few stools down from his own. "Take your time," he said softly. "You're not bothering anybody." She nodded, her hands shaking as she wrapped them around the mug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," Elias assured her, returning to his stool. He took a sip of his own coffee, bitter and lukewarm, and watched as Ron retreated to the back, grumbling under his breath. Tara resumed scrolling on her phone, while the grill cook shot Elias a curious glance before turning back to his work. As the woman ate, Elias let his eyes wander over the diner, cataloging every detail. The staff's lack of energy, Ron's abrasive demeanor, the customer's subdued silence, it all pointed to a deeper rot. He'd seen enough in his years as a leader to know that a place like this didn't fall apart overnight. It started with neglect, with leaders who stopped caring, and trickled down to everyone else. He wondered how long Haven's Rest had been limping along like this, and how many other locations were suffering the same fate. A new figure caught his attention, a young waitress, no older than 20, emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of clean glasses. Her name tag read Lila, and unlike the others, she moved with purpose. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat braid, and her hazel eyes flicked toward the woman at the counter with a flicker of concern. She set the tray down and approached Elias, offering a small, hesitant smile. "Thanks for that," she said quietly, nodding toward the woman. "I wanted to say something, but Ron, he doesn't like it when we step out of line." Elias studied her for a moment, noting the sincerity in her voice. "You work hard around here?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Lila shrugged, glancing over her shoulder to ensure Ron wasn't watching. "I try. It's not always easy, but I like helping people. Makes the day feel worth something." He nodded, filing her name away in his mind. Lila reminded him of the kind of person he'd always wanted at Hearth and Haven, someone who saw the job as more than a paycheck. But if she was the exception, not the rule, then he had a bigger problem than he'd realized. As the woman finished her coffee and slipped out the door with a quiet, "Thank you," Elias made a decision. One visit wasn't enough. He needed to dig deeper, to see how far the cracks ran. Tomorrow, he'd come back, not as a customer, but as someone closer to the heart of the operation. He'd find a way to peel back the layers of Haven's Rest and figure out what it would take to bring it back to life. For now, though, he left a generous tip under his mug and stepped back into the cold, his mind already racing with plans. The wind bit at his face, but he barely felt it. Somewhere beneath the mess he'd just witnessed, there was still a spark of what hearth and haven could be. And he wasn't about to let it die. The next morning, Elias Grayson woke before dawn in the cramped motel room he'd rented on the edge of Eastborough. The mattress sagged beneath him, and the faint hum of a flickering neon sign buzzed through the thin walls. He rubbed his eyes, the weight of yesterday's observations settling like a stone in his chest. Haven's Rest had been a shadow of the vision he'd poured his life into, a place where indifference had replaced warmth, and where a simple act of kindness felt like an anomaly. But he wasn't ready to write it off yet. Today, he'd go deeper. He tugged on the same worn trench coat and knit cap, but this time he added a faded flannel shirt and scuffed work boots he'd picked up from a thrift store. His disguise needed to hold, but it also had to shift. He couldn't just be a customer again, he needed access to the heart of the diner's operations. In his pocket, he carried a crumpled piece of paper, a forged note claiming he was a last-minute hire sent by the regional office. It was a gamble, but Elias had built Hearth and Haven on calculated risks. If he could pass as a new employee, he'd see the truth unfiltered. The sky was still streaked with gray when he arrived at Haven's Rest, the parking lot empty save for a rusted pickup truck and a bicycle chained to a lamppost. The diner opened at 6, and the morning shift was just stirring to life. Elias pushed through the door, the bell jangling weakly above him. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of brewing coffee and the faint sizzle of bacon on the grill. Lila, the young waitress from yesterday, was already there, stacking menus behind the counter. Her braid was slightly frayed, and dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she moved with the same quiet determination he'd noticed before. "Morning," Elias said, his voice gruff as he approached her. He pulled the note from his pocket and held it out. "Name's Tom. I'm supposed to start today. They said to check in with whoever's running the show." Lila took the paper, her brow furrowing as she scanned it. "Oh, okay. I didn't hear about a new hire, but Ron's not here yet. He's the shift lead. I can show you around until he shows up." She hesitated, then offered a small smile. "Welcome, I guess." "Thanks," Elias replied, scratching the back of his neck to play up the nervous newcomer act. "Appreciate it." Lila led him behind the counter, pointing out the basics, the coffee machine, the order pad, the temperamental grill that only works if you sweet-talk it first. As she talked, Elias watched her closely. She was young, maybe 19, but there was a steadiness to her that stood out against the diner's malaise. She didn't just go through the motions, she cared about getting things right, even if no one else seemed to notice. The back kitchen was a different story. Dirty pans were piled in the sink, and a faint mildew scent lingered near the walk-in cooler. The grill cook from yesterday, his name tag read Daryl, leaned against a prep table, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced up as Lila introduced Elias. "New guy, huh? Good luck. This place'll chew you up and spit you out." Elias forced a chuckle. "Had worse jobs. What's the deal around here?" Daryl shrugged, his eyes still on his screen. "Deal is, you do the bare minimum, 'cause that's all they pay you for. Ron's a jerk, Tara's checked out, and the customers complain no matter what. Just keep your head down and you'll survive." Lila shot Daryl a quick look, then turned back to Elias. "It's not always that bad," she said, her tone defensive. "Some days are busy, and people are nice. You just have to find the good parts." Elias nodded, filing away Daryl's cynicism and Lila's quiet optimism. Before he could ask more, the back door swung open, and Ron stormed in, his apron already stained with grease. His broad frame filled the doorway, and his scowl deepened when he saw Elias. "Who's this?" Ron demanded, snatching the note from Lila's hand. He skimmed it, then tossed it onto the counter. "Great. Another body to babysit. We're short-staffed today, so you're on dishes and bussing tables. Lila, show him the ropes. I've got enough to deal with. Ron didn't wait for a response, brushing past them to bark orders at Daryl. Elias caught Lila's eye and saw a flicker of frustration before she masked it with a tight smile. Come on, she said. I'll get you started. The morning unfolded in a blur of scrubbing plates and wiping down sticky tables. Elias kept his head down, but his ears were open. The staff's interactions were a tangle of tension and apathy, Ron snapping at everyone, Tara ignoring customers to text, Daryl muttering complaints under his breath. Lila was the outlier, darting between tasks with a grace that belied her exhaustion. She apologized to a grumbling trucker when his eggs were cold, slipped an extra muffin to a harried mother with a toddler, and even cleaned up a spill Tara had ignored. Elias watched it all, his respect for her growing with every quiet act of kindness. By mid-morning, the diner hit a brief lull. Elias was stacking clean plates when he overheard Ron on the phone near the office door. Yeah, Victor, I know sales are down, Ron said, his voice low but sharp. But I'm not a miracle worker. Half the staff's useless, and the customers are cheapskates. You want better numbers, send me better people. Elias's jaw tightened. Victor Langston, the regional manager, was supposed to be overseeing Haven's Rest. If Ron was this comfortable griping to him, it meant Victor wasn't holding anyone accountable. The rot wasn't just here, it stretched higher up the chain. Before he could dwell on it, the bell jingled, and a man shuffled in, a regular, judging by Lila's quick wave. He was older, with a limp and a threadbare jacket, and he carried a small paper bag that rattled faintly, like it held loose change. He approached the counter, his voice raspy. Just a coffee, Lila. Got $1.50 today. Sure, mister. Hargrove, Lila said, already pouring a cup. But Ron emerged from the back, his eyes narrowing. He's short again, Ron said, loud enough for the handful of customers to hear. I told you last time, Hargrove, no charity. Full price or nothing. Mr. Hargrove's face flushed. I'll pay the rest tomorrow. Always do. Not good enough, Ron snapped. Out. Elias set down a plate, his fists clenching. He stepped forward, pulling another crumpled bill from his pocket. I've got it, he said, sliding the money across the counter. Coffee's on me. Ron glared at him. You're not the boss here, newbie. Stop playing hero. Maybe someone should, Elias shot back, his voice steady but edged with steel. The diner went quiet, all eyes on the standoff. Ron's face reddened, but before he could retort, Lila jumped in. It's fine, Ron, she said quickly, handing Mr. Hargrove his coffee. It's paid for. No harm done. Ron muttered something under his breath and stalked off, leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. Mr. Hargrove nodded at Elias, his gratitude silent but clear, and shuffled to a booth. Lila turned to Elias, her expression a mix of relief and worry. You didn't have to do that, but, thanks. Ron's just having a bad day. Seems like every day's a bad day for him, Elias said, keeping his tone light. You handle this place better than he does. Lila blushed, brushing off the compliment. I just try to keep things running. Someone's got to. The rest of the shift passed in a grind of small tasks, but Elias's mind was racing. Ron's hostility, Tara's detachment, Daryl's apathy, it was a toxic brew, and Lila was the only one holding it together. He thought of the woman from yesterday, the one he'd bought a biscuit for, and now Mr. Hargrove. These were the people Hearth and Haven was meant to serve, not shoo away. And yet, under Ron's watch, the diner had become a gatekeeper instead of a refuge. As the clock ticked toward closing, Elias helped Lila sweep the floor. You're good at this, he said, nodding at her broom work. Why stick around? She paused, leaning on the handle. My dad used to bring me here when I was little. It was different then, warmer. I guess I keep hoping it can be that way again. Plus, I need the money. College isn't cheap. Elias smiled faintly. You're tougher than this place deserves. She laughed, a soft, tired sound. Maybe. But it's home, you know. He did know. Haven's Rest was part of his home too, or it was supposed to be. As he left that night, the cold air stinging his face, Elias felt a fire kindling inside him. Tomorrow, he'd come back with a plan. The disguise wouldn't hold forever, but he wasn't done yet. There was still a chance to save this place, and it started with people like Lila. The third day dawned colder than the last, the sky over Eastboro a heavy slab of gray that seemed to press down on the town. Elias Grayson sat in his motel room, the faint glow of a desk lamp illuminating the notebook he'd been scribbling in since midnight. Pages were filled with observations from Haven's Rest, Ron's abrasive leadership, Tara's disinterest, Daryl's resignation, and Lila's quiet resilience. He'd sketched a rough timeline too, 2 days undercover as a customer and a worker, and now a third to push the boundaries further. Today, he'd test the limits of what he could uncover before the mask came off. He swapped the trench coat for a faded denim jacket, keeping the knit cap and sunglasses but adding a pair of fingerless gloves to sell the image of a drifter scraping by. The forged note had gotten him in as Tom, the new hire, but he needed more than a foot in the door now, he needed to see the diner's soul laid bare. He tucked a small voice recorder into his pocket, a tool he hadn't planned to use but now felt necessary. If Victor Langston, the regional manager, was letting Haven's Rest fester, Elias needed evidence to hold him accountable. The diner was already humming when Elias arrived just after the breakfast rush. The parking lot held a scattering of cars, and through the fogged windows, he could see Lila bustling between tables, her braids swinging as she balanced a tray of plates. He pushed through the door, the bell's jingle lost in the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversation. Ron was behind the counter, barking at Daryl to flip pancakes faster, while Tara leaned against the register, her phone glowing in her hand. Tom, Ron grunted when he spotted Elias. You're late. Grab an apron and help Lila with the tables. She's drowning out there. Elias nodded, keeping his expression neutral. On it. He tied on an apron and joined Lila in the dining area, where she was wiping down a booth while juggling a stack of dirty dishes. Her face brightened slightly when she saw him. Glad you're back, she said, handing him a rag. It's been chaos since 6. Half the orders are wrong, and Ron's in a mood. Seems like his default setting, Elias replied, starting on a table streaked with syrup. You holding up okay? Lila shrugged, her smile tight. Barely. But it's fine. I'm used to it. She shouldn't have to be, Elias thought, but he kept it to himself. They worked in tandem, clearing tables and refilling coffee cups, and he watched her closely. Lila had a knack for reading people, softening a gruff trucker's scowl with a kind word, slipping a napkin doodle to a kid who'd spilled his juice. She was the heartbeat of this place, even if no one else saw it. The morning wore on, and Elias kept his ears open. Customers grumbled about slow service and cold food, their complaints met with shrugs from Tara or sharp retorts from Ron. At one point, a woman in a frayed coat approached the counter, her voice timid. Can I get a bowl of soup to go? I've got $3. Soup's $4.50, Tara said without looking up. No cash, no food. The woman fumbled with her purse, pulling out a handful of coins. I've got $3.82. Please, it's for my son. He's sick. Ron overheard and stomped over. We're not a handouts joint. Pay full or leave. Elias felt the familiar knot tighten in his gut. He stepped forward, digging into his pocket for a few crumpled bills. I'll cover the rest, he said, sliding the money across the counter. Give her the soup. Ron's eyes narrowed. You've got a real bleeding heart problem, Tom. This isn't your call. Maybe it should be someone's, Elias said, his voice low but firm. The woman clutched the to-go container Lila quickly handed her, whispering a shaky, "Thank you," before hurrying out. Ron glared at Elias, but a customer's shout from the back distracted him, and he stormed off. Lila caught Elias's eye, her expression a mix of gratitude and unease. You're gonna get yourself fired if you keep that up. Worth it, Elias said, offering a faint smile. Some things matter more than a paycheck. She nodded, but worry lingered in her gaze. Elias turned back to his work, his mind churning. He'd seen enough to know Ron was a symptom, not the disease. The real question was how deep the dysfunction ran, and who was letting it spread. Midday brought a brief lull, and Elias seized the chance to slip into the back. He found the tiny office, a cluttered closet of a room with a desk buried under papers, and pretended to search for cleaning supplies while scanning the chaos. A stack of employee schedules caught his eye, along with a memo from Victor Langston dated 2 weeks ago. He skimmed it quickly, cut costs where possible. No overtime approvals. Maintain minimum staffing. No mention of customer care or staff morale, just cold numbers. Elias flipped on the recorder and murmured the details into it, his voice barely audible over the hum of the cooler. Footsteps approached, and he shoved the memo back just as Ron burst in. What the hell are you doing in here? Looking for more rags, Elias said, holding up a damp cloth as proof. Tables are a mess. Ron grunted, unconvinced. Get back out there. And stop sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Elias complied, but the encounter left him rattled. He needed more time, but his disguise was fraying at the edges. Ron's suspicion was growing, and Tara had started watching him too, her usual apathy replaced by a flicker of curiosity. He'd have to move fast. The afternoon brought a new wrinkle. A delivery truck pulled up, and Darryl groaned as he hauled boxes of frozen patties and canned goods into the kitchen. Elias pitched in, noticing the labels, cheap, off-brand supplies, a far cry from the quality Hearth and Haven once prided itself on. This what we're cooking with now? He asked, keeping his tone casual. Yeah, Darryl said, wiping sweat from his brow. Victor switched vendors a few months back. Saves money, but the customers notice. Food's crap compared to what it used to be. Elias's jaw tightened. Another piece of the puzzle, Victor cutting corners, sacrificing the diner's soul for a better bottom line. He filed it away, his resolve hardening. As the day wound down, a final incident pushed him to the brink. A teenage boy in a hoodie slipped in, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He approached Lila at the counter, his voice low. Can I get some fries? I've got $2. Before Lila could answer, Ron swooped in. Full price or nothing. We're not a damn charity. The kid's face fell. I haven't eaten since yesterday. Tough luck, Ron snapped. Beat it. Elias had had enough. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. Give him the fries. I'll pay. And while you're at it, explain why this place treats people like garbage instead of feeding them. The diner went silent, every eye on him. Ron's face turned purple. Who do you think you are, huh? You're done here. Get out before I throw you out. Lila grabbed Elias's arm, her voice urgent. Tom, stop. It's not worth it. But it was. Elias pulled free, staring Ron down. You're the one who doesn't belong here, he said, his tone icy. This place was built for people, not your ego. Ron lunged forward, but Tara stepped between them, her phone finally down. Cool it, both of you. Customers are staring. Elias took a breath, his heart pounding. He'd tipped his hand too far, but the fire in him wouldn't let him back down. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out, the cold air hitting him like a slap. Behind him, Lila called out, "Tom, wait," but he kept walking, his mind racing. In the motel that night, he replayed the recorder, the memo's words and Ron's venom echoing in his ears. He'd seen the cracks, neglect from above, poison below, and Lila caught in the middle. Tomorrow, he'd return, not as Tom, but as Elias Grayson, CEO. The disguise had served its purpose, now it was time to act. He stared at the notebook, pen hovering over a blank page. Haven's Rest wasn't lost, not yet. Lila's hope, the flickers of kindness he'd sparked, they were embers he could fan into a flame. But it would take more than a confrontation. It would take a reckoning, with Ron, with Victor, with himself. He'd let this happen, lost sight of his own dream. No more. Sleep came fitfully, but when it did, it carried a vision of Haven's Rest reborn, a beacon in the gray, a hearth for the weary. Tomorrow, he'd fight for it. Elias Grayson barely slept. The motel room's thin walls creaked with every gust of wind, but it was the storm in his mind that kept him awake. His notebook lay open on the bedside table, its pages a roadmap of Haven's Rest's failures, and his own. For 3 days, he'd walked among the staff and customers as Tom, witnessing the diner's decay firsthand, Ron's cruelty, Tara's apathy, Daryl's resignation, and the quiet heroism of Lila holding it all together. He'd seen enough to know the rot wasn't just in the diner, it was in the company he'd built, in the oversight he'd allowed to lapse. Today, March 16, 2025, that ended. He rose with the sun, shedding the disguise that had cloaked him. The knit cap, sunglasses, and denim jacket went into a duffel bag, replaced by a crisp button-down shirt and a tailored coat. His graying hair was combed back, his blue eyes sharp and unhidden. The Elias Grayson who stepped out of the motel wasn't a drifter, he was a man on a mission. In his briefcase, he carried the voice recorder, the memo from Victor Langston, and a plan scribbled in the notebook's margins. Haven's Rest deserved better. So did its people. The diner's parking lot was quiet when he arrived, the morning shift just beginning. Through the windows, he saw Lila setting out coffee cups, her movements weary but precise. Ron's pickup was parked crookedly near the back, a sign he was already inside, likely barking orders. Elias took a deep breath, the cold air steadying him, and pushed through the door. The bell jingled, sharper this time, as if announcing the shift to come. Lila looked up, her hazel eyes widening slightly. "Morning," she said, then paused, tilting her head. "You're not Tom, are you?" Elias smiled faintly. "Not quite. I need to speak with Ron. And everyone else. Can you gather them?" She hesitated, sensing the weight in his voice, then nodded. "Sure. Give me a minute." She disappeared into the back, and Elias stood by the counter, surveying the diner. The checkered floor was scuffed, the booths worn, but the bones of the place were solid. It could be a haven again. Ron emerged first, his scowl deepening when he saw Elias. "Who the hell are you? We're not open yet, get lost." Tara and Daryl trailed behind, curiosity breaking through their usual indifference. Lila lingered near the kitchen door, her arms crossed, watching. Elias set his briefcase on the counter and opened it, pulling out the recorder. "My name's Elias Grayson. I'm the CEO of Hearth and Haven. And I've been here all week." The air went still. Ron's face paled, then flushed red. Tara's phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Daryl muttered a curse under his breath, while Lila's mouth parted in silent shock. Elias let the silence stretch, then pressed play on the recorder. His own voice filled the room, reciting Victor's memo: cut costs where possible. No overtime approvals. Maintain minimum staffing. Then Ron's from yesterday, we're not a damn charity. Beat it. He stopped the tape. That's what I found here, Elias said, his tone calm but unyielding. A place I built to welcome people, turned into a gatekeeper. I saw customers turned away for $1 short, staff stretched thin and ignored, and a manager who'd rather yell than lead. His eyes locked on Ron. That ends today. Ron sputtered, stepping forward. You can't just waltz in here and... I can, Elias cut in, pulling a termination letter from the briefcase and sliding it across the counter. You're done, Ron. Pack your things and go. You've poisoned this place long enough. Ron's fists clenched, his voice rising. You think you can fire me after 3 days of playing dress-up? I've kept this dump running. No, Elias said, gesturing to Lila. She has. You've just been in the way. Ron glared at Lila, then back at Elias, but the fight drained from him under the CEO's steady gaze. He snatched the letter, muttered a string of curses, and stormed out, slamming the back door behind him. Tara shifted uncomfortably, while Daryl stared at the floor. Lila stepped closer, her expression a mix of disbelief and hope. Elias turned to them. I owe you all an apology. I let this happen, let the vision slip. Hearth and Haven was meant to be a refuge, not a battleground. I've been too far removed, trusting reports instead of seeing for myself. That changes now. He pulled out a chair and sat, leveling with them. Tara, Daryl, I've seen you coasting. I get it. Bad leadership kills morale. But if you're staying, I need more. This place needs more. Can you give it? Tara nodded slowly, picking up her phone with a sheepish look. Yeah. I can try. Daryl rubbed his neck. Been a while since it felt like it mattered. If you're serious, I'm in. Good, Elias said, then turned to Lila. You've been the soul of this place, Lila. I saw it every day, how you care, how you fight to keep it alive. I'm promoting you to manager, effective immediately. You'll get a raise, and I'll back you up to make this right. Her eyes widened. Me? I don't know if I'm ready. You are, Elias said firmly. You've been doing the job already, just without the title. I trust you to bring back what this place lost. She swallowed, then nodded, a spark igniting in her gaze. Okay. I'll do it. Elias stood, addressing them all. We're closing for 2 days, paid, for all of you. I'm bringing in a crew to fix this place up, new supplies, better food, a deep clean. When we reopen, it's a fresh start. But it's not just about the building. It's about us. I want Haven's Rest to be what it was meant to be, a hearth for anyone who walks through that door. No one gets turned away for a few cents short. No one leaves hungry if we can help it. That's my promise. He paused, letting it sink in. I'll be here, not just today, but regularly. No more hiding behind desks or disguises. You'll see me, and I'll see you. We're rebuilding this together. Tara cracked a rare smile. Guess I'll ditch the phone more often. Daryl chuckled. And I'll sweet-talk that grill into behaving. Lila stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. Thank you, Mr. Grayson. For seeing us. For caring. Call me Elias, he said. And thank you for not giving up. The next 2 days were a whirlwind. Elias stayed in Eastborough, overseeing the transformation. Contractors repainted walls, replaced cracked booths, and stocked the kitchen with quality ingredients. He met with Victor Langston via video call, playing the recorder and demanding answers. Victor stammered excuses, but Elias cut him off. His resignation was expected by week's end. The message was clear, no more cutting corners. When Haven's Rest reopened, the change was palpable. The diner gleamed, the air rich with the scent of fresh biscuits and brewing coffee. Customers returned, drawn by word of mouth, and Lila stood at the helm, her quiet confidence guiding the team. Tara chatted with regulars, Daryl grinned as he flipped pancakes, and Elias watched from a corner booth, a cup of coffee in hand. A familiar figure shuffled in, the woman from his first day, her scarf still frayed but her posture less defeated. Lila greeted her with a smile. "Coffee and a biscuit, on the house. Take your time." The woman's eyes glistened. "You sure?" "Always," Lila said, and Elias felt a lump rise in his throat. He stepped outside later, the cold less biting now. The notebook rested in his pocket, its final page titled "The Hearth Rekindled." Haven's Rest was just the start. He'd visit every location, root out the rot, and rebuild the dream. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. As he walked to his car, Lila called out, "Elias. You coming back tomorrow?" He turned, smiling. "Wouldn't miss it." The diner's lights glowed behind her, a beacon in the gray. Elias drove off, the road ahead uncertain but bright. He'd lost his way once, but he'd found it again, here, in the heart of Haven's Rest, where the weary could rest, and the hearth burned anew.